Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our HashiCorp Solutions Engineering Hangout hosted by James Hika. Today, we're going to talk about HashiCorp Vault. HashiCorp Vault is used to manage secrets and protect sensitive data. James is going to discuss a common use case encountered when working with a directory and our secrets management solution. I also want to note that the Hangout is recorded, and the recording will be made available after post-processing, usually within a few days. I'll email it out to all of you. The presentation and demo will be about 40 minutes, and then we'll allow up to 15 minutes afterward for questions. Please submit your questions throughout the demo through the Q&A portal, and then we'll answer them at the end. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Take it away, James.
Thank you so much, Alison. Appreciate setting this up. Welcome, everybody, and thank you for taking an hour of your time out to talk a little bit about Active Directory and how we can work together with Vault in a way that is beneficial to an organization. Hope everybody can see my slides. Please let the producers know if you cannot. A little bit about the agenda for today. I wanted to just touch a little bit on the importance and the ubiquity of Active Directory in most organizations. I'll define and just talk a little bit about what Active Directory is, how people typically use it, what directories are in general. Then a little bit about the use cases that we at HashiCorp have built Vault capabilities for, how those tie into Active Directory. And then I wanted to talk a little bit too about the benefits of those use cases. Why did we do them? What ultimately does a customer get that they did not have before or had a challenge with before? I then want to jump into a little bit of a demo, just show some of that capability in action, and then leave a little bit of time at the end for any questions you might have. Please feel free to type in any Q's and A's, I think, for the producers, and we'll go through those at the end. So let's start with directories in general. So what is a directory? So a directory is a specialized database, essentially. It is highly optimized for fast retrieval of typically key value pairs. So most directories first made popular by systems like Novell, and its additional products like DirXML. All of these were database tools that could store configuration that was typically in the form of a key and a value pair. And so directories were built to be extremely fast at retrieving those pieces of information. You could put in filters that were broad and had many, many different search parameters in them, and they're fantastic to work with. Directories are also very, very well understood and known quantities. You might not have interacted with a directory in perhaps your professional experience, but behind the scenes in the data center, this is a very important piece of software. It is typically part of identity management systems. It is used to store configuration, and pretty much for anything that has attributes, it is a fantastic solution there. So Active Directory, we like to actually say is a directory server that comes with an operating system. It is quite tightly bound into the Windows ecosystem. So when you typically get Windows Server, in my case, I'll be using a Windows Server 2016 edition. You do get Active Directory as one of those components that you can turn on within that environment. I'll probably give a little bit of a walkthrough of what that looks like as we get closer to the demo. Active Directory being a part of that operating system has allowed it to permeate into a lot of data centers, into a lot of operations environments, and typically is either not charged or only for a certain additional features and capabilities is it charged. And because it's the easy button for a lot of operators, it has a huge following, and there's a lot of people who use it. It works beautifully, works well, supports the LDAP standards for importing data, for performing the search, using the protocols. So it's a fantastic solution if you have it in the environment today. Moving on to some of the use cases that we support. HashiCorp Vault is built to manage pretty much two base use cases. The first is the rotation of credentials for entities within Active Directory. So what kinds of things are stored in Active Directory? So it's objects that represent users, objects that represent machines, could be printers, could be just about anything. But it's typically pieces of hardware or specific users. And with those users comes the management of the password for accessing a system, a domain, is also stored as a property on that user account. So HashiCorp Vault will support the rotation of that password lazily. And when we say lazily, we simply mean that the next time you try to read those credentials is when the rotation happens. It does not happen proactively through Vault sensing that a time to live has expired and then actively doing it. It is my understanding that that may be changing in the coming weeks as HashiCorp Vault continues to improve in its capabilities, and we may actually get a proactive secrets rotation capability there. The second use case is really going to be around the checking out of what are called service account credentials. So what is a service account? There is a special kind of entity or object within Active Directory and Microsoft Windows world called a managed service account. This is almost, can be thought of as an amalgamation of a user account and a machine account. So it is both. But it does have certain restrictions. You cannot interactively log into a system using a managed service account. But you typically can use it to run an application, such as a database. If you need a user to actually execute some kind of .NET Core application as a service for a long period of time. So these credentials are typically restricted, and they behave like sometimes like pseudo credentials on the Linux world, where they allow you to elevate your access for a time, for example, when an application is running, until such time that you want to close down that particular account. So I will demonstrate the rotation of credentials for AD users as well as managed service account users, and also show you the checking out or checking back in of those managed service accounts. What are some of the benefits, right? This secrets engine, which is what we call the capability within Vault that manages credentials or secrets for a particular type of service environment. What are some of the benefits you get from using this? So the first is Vault's interface and Vault's mechanism for rotation of passwords is quite consistent. You learn it once, and it feels the same when you're rotating credentials for AWS or a database. The motions that you go through are very much the same. Because Vault can also be integrated into some kind of portal workflow. For example, if you had a ServiceNow system and you wanted to tie in through APIs into a Vault system, you could offer a self-service password management or password rotation mechanism to your end users. This is really mostly falling on the fact that Vault supports a wonderful API, both at the command line and the HTTP API layer. But you can offer this out because this secrets engine lends itself to an API. The third benefit is really for the operators who would have a single common approach for rotating passwords in AD, right? Again, they would be able to rotate them for Mongo or Oracle or SQL Server very much the same way as they would for Azure and Azure resources or AWS. It's also a free offering in Vault's open source capabilities. So if today you wanted to try this out, you can absolutely go to releases.hashicorp.com, pull down any of our releases, and you'll be able to try this out. The other, more subtle point here is really that this capability will work on the enterprise side within namespaces. HashiCorp Vault namespaces are a way to have sort of vaults within the vault, secluded spaces within which credentials can be managed by different groups and teams. And since you can set up multiple secrets engine in all those different namespaces, you can use a single vault instance to help manage many, many different types of secrets rotation, including AD rotation within those namespaces. This diagram, I just wanted to give a bit of a highlight of the process that you might go through. Right down in the middle here, as an application or mission user, I happen to work in the public sector space, so we don't always talk about business users. We sometimes have what are known as mission users. You might go through a portal to request credentials, rotation, or checkout. Or you might go directly against the Vault server through an administrator to request those credentials. That Vault instance would then lazily rotate those credentials by accessing and reading them out of Active Directory and return those credentials, right, for either user accounts or for those service accounts. And you would receive those credentials and then be able to access a system or through the authentication, identity verification through Active Directory. So within this diagram, we'll really be focused on these aspects, the lazy credential rotation for both user accounts as well as service accounts. So what I will do now is I will just begin sharing my screen so that I can do this particular demo. Please just let me know if you can see my screen. Everybody see everything fine? Okay, thank you. So just a little bit about the setup here. I'm going to be using what's known as a Jupyter notebook. For those of you who are not familiar with what Jupyter is, Jupyter happens to be a notebook-style interface that can hold what's called a kernel, or essentially a session of a command line. So rather than opening up a terminal window and executing all my commands, I can lay them out in a very nice document format that can act as a record, and I can save this, print this, and share it out later. The other thing I wanted to do is also quickly just walk through and show you my Vault instance. Sorry, my Active Directory instance. So what I have here is a Vagrant box that I started up. I happened to find one on the web somewhere that had an Active Directory instance already configured and installed locally. And you can open up the Active Directory Explorer, allows you to see all these different folders and pathways. So here we have a lot of users. I'll just pick one of these. And as you can see, every user has a lot of variables, attributes that is associated with them. They have a display name, which is Amargo Franny. Their mail is in there. You might have what type of user this is, right? This happens to be a person, right? So that category would be a person. And there's a whole bunch of other attributes that get stored against that person. So we will be working with one of these users to rotate their credentials. All right, so that's enough for that. Another supporting cast member is actually going to be my Apache Directory Studio. This is just a client. This is an LDAP client that helps me connect, can even change the same information you were seeing right now. I use this to help me confirm things like connections and those kinds of things. So if you ever want to play around with Active Directory, this is a fantastic client. And I will have some links with the information at the end. The final cast member is actually going to be a container. I'm going to run Vault in a Docker container as opposed to executing it from my command line. So that will show up here a little bit later. All right, so just to give you a sense for how this environment works, I'm able to read out my notes. You can read them too. I talk a little bit about the value of this capability, and I can make this available to you as a PDF after. Once again, we're going to be just focusing on step number 3, step number 4 here, where we rotate credentials amongst the different types of accounts, service accounts, managed service accounts, as well as user accounts. All right. This is a link to the Vagrant box that I actually am using. You can go there. It's freely available and it's fantastic to use. Now, a couple of cautionary notes for those who are willing to try this out. You must connect to an LDAP instance that has TLS already configured. So Active Directory is smart enough to know that it will not rotate credentials over an unencrypted LDAP connection. So there is a guide here, a link to how to do this if you have an Active Directory system that is not yet secured with TLS. But if you do require something that's ready to go, you can go to this link, pull down a box, and you can get going. But you do need LDAP-S to be active. All right, so a couple of things. You do need I created a separate network in Docker for this. I'm not going to create it again, but I'm going to create a container. I simply hit a command, and you can see I get the container hash coming out of that. Just to show you, I get a container created. It's not yet started. And then you can start up that container, command line. So every one of these are just commands I'm giving, very much as you would if you were on the command line, right? So there's my container running. I can even inspect it, and you can see all the wonderful output that comes with that. All right, in this particular environment, I'm going to need a couple of variables. One of them is I need to know where my Vault server is. I'm just working in dev mode, so I'm going to be executing using a root token. I'm not using TLS or anything like that for Vault access. I will also be quickly adding in my license key, just for those who would like to see it. So I just use the Vault root token. I'm just testing out that I can reach the Vault. I can connect. Want to make sure it's not sealed. When I run the status, I can see that sealed is false, and it's fully initialized. All in memory. Nothing complicated here. For those interested, the current Vault version I'm using is pretty much the latest. Happens to be what's on my system. And with this command, I'm pointing at my license file, and there's no output, but I managed to put licensing in there. So we'll move ahead with the first sort of use case, rotating ordinary user credentials lazily. So there's a number of exports that you're going to need. In my case, these are just environment variables that I'd like to use as I define that distinguished name and password for connecting to Active Directory. I gotta have an Active Directory somewhere. So I showed you the directory is running on my Mac system, but Vault needs access to it. So we use the host.docker internal to refer to the host system because Vault is running inside the Docker container. I've changed up the ports a little bit, and notice it's also running with secure LDAP protocol. All users are in this folder called example local, and I want to make sure that at least from Vault connecting over to AD, I just set the insecure TLS to true. All right, let's turn on the secrets engine on the Vault server. Okay, so we got that turned on. And then one of the first things we want to do is configure connectivity to the Active Directory instance, right? So we do that by passing in that username, password, the URL, all that information. We write that into Vault. Oops, did I miss? I did not execute this. So let's do that. All right, perfect. Our credentials are all written in. So you need some users. You can't rotate an empty folder. So I showed you I had a whole folder of multiple users. So I've solved that particular problem. But there's one more piece of information you need, which is each user needs to have an attribute on them called the user principal name. When you create a user in Active Directory, they will typically get this particular attribute. It is automatically assigned. But in the event that it does not, you can set it, and you can set it to any value, provided it's a value you can remember or know how you generate. In this case, I'm going to be using a user called V. Lehmans. This happens to be the user principal name. As a result, I'm just pointing that out. And the reason this is important is because when you're creating the roles in Vault, this service account name that you're going to provide is actually the value of the user principal name attribute. So if you don't have it, Vault will not be able to configure the role because it does not know what user this is. Okay, so here we're going to create a role in that Active Directory secrets engine called V. Lehmans. And we're tying it to that, that user name, and we'll give it some time to live. Okay, that's just configuring what the role by default gives in terms of a TTL, 100 seconds being a minute 40 seconds. If you wanted to do multiple users, just comma separate them out, and you'd be able to get that done. All right, so let's list out what roles we know about. We only know about the V. Lehmans user. And what about the last time we updated? So password was last set a little earlier today as I was testing it out. And you can see the time to live is that time. So how do you actually read this role? Well, you actually execute it and perform a read against that particular for credentials with that role name. I'm pulling it out in JSON format here so that I could see if I wanted to use JQ, how do I actually pull just the current password out? So I'm going to pull that out. So I just captured that. And I'm going to use the LDAP search command to test out an authenticated bind where I have to supply a username password, right? This is the way I show that works, right? So here I am. Here's the user, Valerie Lehmans. I'm passing in that password I just received. I got to do this before minute 40 is over. And I just do a search. And I'm able to authenticate, bind to the directory, authenticate, and perform a search. And it pulls back 3 records for 3 users, right? I could have changed that to 8 users, execute that. I just get a ton more of those users that you saw earlier. Okay, so LDAP search performs a search essentially across a particular space. In this case, all the users in that container. So one thing I want to go back up and show you, which I almost glossed over. For LDAP search to work, particularly on your Mac system, there is an LDAP. This is an open LDAP search tool. There is an LDAP.config file that you have in /etc conf, and you do need to ensure that this line is included. That just sets this to allow. By default, it says demand. Once that is set, it will allow the search to continue. All right, so right there, you've seen that as long as that password TTL has not been reached, the current password, this should work. I'm thinking at this point, probably it's not dead yet. At some point, that password will expire and will not be usable. And you can get a new password by reading again from that particular endpoint. So how can this be used? This can be used for regular user password rotation, and you can do this en masse. But you can also use it for certain accounts, interactive user accounts that you might want to only provide access to for a short period of time, access some system, and then rotate out. All right, second use case. This is very similar. I'm just rotating credentials for a managed service account. Now, I happen to have a description here for how to do this from your command line, your PowerShell command line, if you wanted to. I'll provide this as part of the output. I already have such users I had created ahead of time, so I won't be running that particular command again. So what I'm going to start with is I'm just going to configure a new role for a new user called DSA, a managed service account. DSA standing for Directory Service Account. And it looks very much the same. I can read that out, and you can see that service account last set on that particular date and time. And then I can perform the rotation, and out comes a new password. Once again, I can capture it in a variable, right, and pull it out again. After a minute 40, if I run this again, it'll actually come up with a completely different password. Right. So let's jump into the next portion of this, which is really around the service account checkout. So in your managed service accounts folder, right, you can see here I happen to have, just make that a little bit larger. There are 3 managed service accounts, one called Buzz, the DSA account I just used, and another called Fizz. Keep in mind that, again, these accounts cannot be used to interactively log into systems. They're typically only used to run long-running services, okay? So you might want to check one out, use it to run a database for a limited period of time from a few minutes, couple weeks, months, at which point those credentials expire, and then they have to be rotated. So you can do it on the basis of some kind of policy that you have. If you also look at the name of any one of these, you'll see that it does say it's a managed service account. Another way you can tell is if you look at what are called the object classes that belong to that particular object, you'll see that they are quite different. They have both a person and a machine attribute on them. Sorry, this is actually the folder. So if you look at any one of these attributes for the specific entity, you'd see it's very different. So if you're doing it through the user interface there, you'd add a new object of type MSDS managed service account. That would look like this. You say, I want to create a new object. You would configure the attributes. An important attribute here is going to be user principal name for the same reasons I outlined before. And then you can set them with default values or blank values. It's entirely up to you. And you repeat this process for all the attributes that are necessary before you complete and create that object. Okay. So once the managed service account exists, we can now begin configuration in Vault so that we can actually check these out. So there are going to be two managed service accounts that I want to check out. Those are going to be the fizz@example.com or the buzz@example.com. Okay. Time to live is 1 minute. The max is 2. So here we go. So I've written out that particular configuration in a special path called ad/library. You can give it any name you want. Probably better to name it closer to the purpose that's intended. A note about enforcement. A service account must be checked in by the same Vault entity and client token that checked it out, right? Now, if you have any problems with this, you just check, you change this particular setting, right, to true. Okay, so let's view what the status is for that particular configuration. So it knows about those two accounts and their availability. So if I now want to check out an account, I would simply write a command to that particular path and with the checkout at the end. And I get a lease for 1 minute, renewable for that particular credential, the fizz@example.com. There's my password that I could do that. If you were to hit that again, you would get the other one because one of them's already checked out. And if you try to do it again, you'd get an error because there are no service accounts available for checkout. So you sort of do have to wait a little bit before you can get that. Now, I'm just going to grab this particular lease ID here. I'd like to renew that. So I'm just going to paste that in there. And I can renew that particular lease for a little bit longer. And you can also check back in accounts by using the check-in endpoint and provide the name of that service account. Okay. And if you just hit the check-in, there must be only one left, right? Because if there were multiple that were out there, then it would say, no, you have to actually specify the exact name. But with this particular check-in command, there's nothing left to check in. They're all in. So some of the benefits there are, this is a fantastic way to check out a service account for temporary use for, from a pool. Think about, these accounts, think of these types of accounts as being scarce resources that sometimes you actually get charged extra for, right? I think the client access license for Microsoft does charge you for these. So one of the massive cost-saving benefits is to manage these as a pool. And through Vault, you can actually control the checking out and use of such accounts and keep your costs low. The API capabilities, again, make this something that is easy and conveniently provisioned and offered through a portal, a ServiceNow portal, a BMC portal, doesn't really matter. Particularly if you want to access sensitive, if you wanted to run sensitive applications for a limited period of time and control their use and access. So this is a way of curating them. You don't reuse passwords, so you can keep up with compliance, and it's automatically all audited and logged as part of Vault's interactions. Okay. So with that, that just kind of brings an end to that portion. So I'm going to finish up on the slide deck. Just let me know if you can see my slides.
Yes, should be good to go.
Okay, fantastic. So just a quick recap on the tools I used. LDAP search, command line tool for performing LDAP type queries against any directory that supports the LDAP protocol. Apache Directory Studio, free open source tool for connecting to all things LDAP. This is just a must-have. You do need a Windows machine. I gave you a link there that will actually help you get a nice Vagrant box that you can try this out with. And for those of you interested in the Jupyter environment, Jupyter Lab is what I'm using. You can just do a search for Jupyter Lab. It's free. It's perfect for web-based experimentation or for doing demos like the one I have just done here. And so in conclusion, the key takeaways, this is a popular use case, I think, really helps with keeping and managing secrets in the enterprise. Active Directory does have special requirements. You have to have TLS for that rotation to happen. And keep in mind that managed service accounts are different from regular user accounts. They cannot interactively be used to go into machines because they act both as a user and a machine all at once. And that is their function. They're restricted in use. And so for customers who are looking to move away from managing user passwords directly using AD tools, this is a fantastic way to manage that and to manage for the other use cases they might have. So with that, please, I'd be happy to take on any questions.
Oh, James, yeah, we have a few in the Q&A box. So I can start by reading the first one. Can you say more about active credential rotation as opposed to lazy or a pointer for more info?
Yes. So the primary difference is lazy rotation is rotation only at the point that the credentials are read out of Active Directory. Active credential rotation would be credential rotation when the time to live expires. So, I don't know even if this is supposed to be said or not, but I think this is something that the Vault team is looking at implementing, which, I don't know what release, but it'll be probably coming into Vault where Active Directory credentials can be actively rotated as the time to live for those credentials expires. Does that make sense? I hope that answers the question.
Yes, and there was a separate one that may be related. Can Vault rotate lazy or not the password to a local account on a Windows computer, not an AD account, just local to the machine in question?
Vault can, but only through a special secrets engine. There is a gentleman on GitHub who has a secrets engine for rotating local machine credentials, both for Linux and Windows. Vault out of the box does not do that. So yeah, I mean, the way I've done it is I have used this special secrets engine that he built that will actually rotate it locally.
Okay. Another one. I'm curious around the additional enhancements you mentioned around the AD secrets. Can you provide any additional detail around that?
It's an interesting question. I'm not sure what he means by additional enhancements, but I was really referring to the enhancements that are going to allow the active credential rotation. There are quite a few changes coming, I think, to the AD secrets engine over the coming releases, but that's something that I think the Vault team will release more details as that time comes.
Okay. Is there a way to pin the configuration to a specific set of domain controllers? We have a fair number of DCs geographically dispersed and would like to limit Vault to communicate with a designated set?
I don't think there is at the moment, other than, well, first of all, if all of that is on one instance, then it would have to be either through attributes or through the path where these particular users sit. That would be really the only way. I haven't seen any configuration that allows you to pin down which of those controllers you'd like to rotate secrets for. So that's an interesting question. I'll actually take a note and see if I can get some information on it. Okay.
Okay. What is the difference using IDAP and OIDC?
Oh, wow. Okay, so LDAP versus OIDC. So OIDC really has to do with, I think that's a whole key and user identification and verification mechanism. LDAP is simply a protocol. LDAP is a wire protocol for describing how you're going to connect and communicate information, requests, queries against a directory server. Now, most directory servers are also used as identity providers. So people will use the fact that they can authenticate. That's what they call the authenticated bind. You can authenticate and bind to an LDAP server. That can be used as proof that that's a known user within that particular directory. And therefore, based on a successful bind, you might allow access to another resource. OIDC is a pure protocol for authenticating a user, a machine, as being who they say they are. So they are sort of completely different use cases. One really is about establishing identity. The other is just a protocol for communicating with a particular type of server. At least that's the way I understand it.
Okay, great. You've made several references to integrating with another portal. Will Vault improve or expand its UI for direct access by end users, or is it seen as an API first with minimal UI?
So that's a great question. It's a question I ask a lot too. I think there will be additions based on customer requests to the Vault UI to expand it. Surprisingly, I feel like I could also benefit from using such improved user interface, whether it had things like, for example, if it had dashboards. I think that would be fantastic. That would be something that we could all benefit from being able to see and use and quickly get to the secrets that we want to. I think improvements like that might be useful. But I really still feel that working with Vault through the API is where its secret strength lies. Because, secrets engines, secrets managers are really not end user type capabilities, where that specific user experience is something that everybody craves. They tend to perform best when other systems are connecting. Remember, it's not really people necessarily who are touching Vault for the most part. I feel it tends to be systems coming in, requesting secrets, requesting credentials, rotating certs, whatever it might be. So I think we need improvements in both, right? I think we will see some more improvements on the Vault UI just based on customer demand from the things that I've seen. But I do not work on the Vault team. I have no specific knowledge of certain things that are coming down the pipe.
Makes sense. Okay, and then how does this compare to retail products such as CyberArk and Thycotic Secret Server?
So I have no experience of Thycotic Secret Server. I can talk a little bit to CyberArk, which is really, to me, I think people use, when we say we compare Vault to CyberArk, we're really talking about Conjure, right? We're talking about that secrets password manager piece that they have in there. It's not the whole platform. So I think of a Venn diagram. I think the space of capability that Vault occupies is much larger than what Conjure is dealing with. Conjure manages passwords. Vault was not designed as a password manager, even though there are ways you can actually have Vault generate passwords. I think Vault's use cases are just much broader, and they're much more focused on identity than what CyberArk's offering is designed for. I think if you look at Vault, think about it first as an identity broker, right? You come in with many, many different identities. You're the same entity. We can authenticate who you are and then provide you access to a credential or a token or whatever that secret is, which could be a URL for an endpoint, and allow you to access that. I'm not sure that's exactly what you would use CyberArk for, other than I think a much more limited use case. So I think of it in terms of the breadth of use cases. And what comes to my mind is that Venn diagram where we manage many, many more use cases than what Conjure will.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so thank you so much for your expertise on all of those questions, James. As I mentioned at the beginning, this Hangout was recorded, and we'll make the recording available on our website after processing. We'll also send an email to everyone who registered with that recording link. If you liked what you heard today and want to start exploring Vault, I encourage you to check out our Learn site. You can find it on our website at learn.hashicorp.com/vault. I hope you all enjoyed today's Hangout and have a better understanding of Vault. Thanks for hanging out with us today, and big thank you to James for his time. That wraps things up for us. Have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thank you.